Welcome to WJ Live, where we equip listeners with the truth. My name is Michael Austin, a reporter for the Western Journal. Today I'll be joined by Josh Manning, George Upper, and special guest Ray Lee Klein, a journalism student who was forced out of a management position over a tweet. We'll talk about the establishment media's clear bias and the ongoing censorship of the Hunter Biden story. So we're joined by Ray Lee Klein today. Ray Lee is a student journalist from Arizona State University who recently had a bit of a brush up with cancel culture, all involving the August 23rd shooting of Jacob Blake. Ray Lee shared a New York Post story that had some important context to that case. And for doing so, she was essentially canceled for it at her school. So Ray Lee, for those of us that don't know your story, please kind of share what's been going on with you over the past few months.
Absolutely. So I am a student at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State, and I was the station manager of the student-run radio station, which is Blaze Radio. And we were getting ready to start our next season of programming, and I had found an article from the New York Post that had held the alleged sexual assault allegations against Jacob Blake. And at this time, it was a very fresh story. A lot of people didn't know what was happening. So as a journalist, I felt the need to share that information with my constituents. So I retweeted the article with the caption, "There's always more to the story, folks. Please take the time to read this article about Jacob Blake's arrest warrant. You'll be quite disgusted." And the school just absolutely blew up over the tweet, thought it was the worst thing in the world, and asked for my resignation from my position, which I declined. I never stepped down willingly, and it came to the dean having to step in and unfortunately take the side of removing me from the position. So now I've hired a great attorney here in Phoenix, and there's been a suit filed against the school. So based on censorship and free speech. So it's an ongoing situation, but I think very reflective of a greater narrative that's happening in our country at this time.
Did they ever give you a specific reason why they removed you from that position?
They said I had violated what is called the Cronkite social media guidelines, which is what they expect their students to kind of adhere to, but they're broken right and left, right? We're students learning how to navigate the journalism world, and the paragraph that they had said that I violated had to do with showing, opinions and bias, whether that be a sports fandom or a political view, which, like I said, everybody breaks all the time. So it was a very, very weak defense from my view.
And I thought it was interesting. A lot of people called your comments, or not your comments, but just sharing the story racist, and without providing kind of any context or reason for why that would be racist, to share just important context and even point out that there is a female victim in the situation here,
Right.
which the left would normally champion.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was just weird to think that they had said that the comment, there's always more to the story, folks, was me justifying him getting shot, which was not at all the case. I just thought
Right.
people needed to understand why the police were called in the first place. What were they doing there? And this is why it was an ongoing situation with this woman. And I thought, like you said, that the left would pick up on that and really feel for her and back her, and that has not been the case at all, which is just so mind-boggling to me.
So,
I was just going to say, the left only, as you guys know, and as you have learned, the left is only interested in championing the causes of women who believe as they do. We saw that actually this week with, did you see Kirstie Alley announced on Twitter that she had voted for Trump. The left went wild, and I was very disappointed to see Marina Sirtis tweet back to her, "You are dead to me." And Marina Sirtis was on
So
Star
tolerant.
Trek: Next Generation, which is a
So tolerant.
show that Josh and I are both fans on. So that was fans of. That was very disappointing to me to see. Her, not surprising, but disappointing.
The interesting
Yeah.
thing about this is that it sort of reveals the hierarchy that the left embraces right now. You would think that a woman potentially sexually assaulted, especially sort of post Me Too, would be pretty significant, but apparently that is outranked in the left's hierarchy by a black man who's been shot by police.
But only by police.
But only by police. But only by police. Exactly. Chicago doesn't matter. Just write
That's
it
right.
off. Apparently,
Exactly.
that's what happens
But if
there.
it's done by police,
So I'm curious, Rayleigh, how does
Mhm.
actually as a woman, how does that make you feel? Because it sounds to me like they're saying, okay, sexual assault, we're not really going to worry about that much.
That's one of the things that I think bothers me the most about, their way of going about things is people's stories and their thoughts and opinions only matter when they say it does. And that's what I've heard from so many African Americans, Latino communities is they don't need someone to tell them that their story or, their background matters. They don't need that. They don't want that. And as a woman, where the left champions for you all the time, wants to empower you. The minute you say you're a conservative woman, they want to shut you down. They don't want to hear it. And, Senator Blackburn talked about that in the,
yes, she did.
and so it's hard to be a conservative woman when you have one side saying that your opinions, you're a woman, go for it, women empowerment. And then as soon as you add conservative, one word to that, then it's completely just shot down and irrelevant. And I think that's, where we see the hypocrisy at its finest is, just in that statement of itself.
Don't we get, as we do more and more of this, we have an enormous crowd with a lot of influence on the media trying to enforce among the populace a specific point of view. The closer we get to that, isn't that the closer we get to actual fascism?
Oh, absolutely. I think censorship is shining bright and beautiful in our nation right now, which is very, very disappointing to see. Not only as a journalist who got into the field to bring truth and integrity back to the organization in the career field, but as a young American who is very proud of their country and very proud of everything it stands for, to see this going on behind the scenes, whether people want to acknowledge it or not, is beyond disheartening.
Yeah. So I just graduated 2019 from Iowa State University, and I noticed at school that they didn't want anything outside the narrative to be discussed within the classroom. Do you think that this is a bigger problem with ASU in general and universities in general, that left-wing voices are sort of uplifted over all other opinions?
Oh, absolutely. I've had so many messages from this instance come forward, and people come to me and say and share their stories of being similar. Just on Fox News last night, we saw a high school student that had a Trump banner in his background for school, and his chemistry teacher asked him to take it down. And if he didn't, he'd be kicked out of the class. And so, to save his grades, because this was ongoing, he had to take it down. And then meantime, we have students all over posting Black Lives Matter and defund the police, and that goes completely unchecked. So if you want to share your opinions, go ahead.
What school was that, did you say, with a chemistry student?
I don't know the school exactly. I just know it was a high school. So,
so probably a state institution. Well, that's good. That's going to work out really well for him.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So
maybe
it's
send him the name of your lawyer.
I know. I wanted to reach out to him and be like, hey, you're not alone. We're all in this. So it's just ongoing that, one side gets completely bullied and silenced and the other side gets uplifted and promoted. And it's just, pick a side, but don't, choose if you want to share those voices, but share it for everybody. So.
Yeah.
So it's sort of interesting to watch the forces of the left arrayed against you and then contrast that with their narrative on race, which is that you have white privilege and you really don't deserve it, and you have all of these advantages that other people don't have. As the school's going after you right now, how does that feel? How's that white privilege working out for you?
I just laugh at it. I really do. I think it's, almost comical to hear it, because it's like the way that they want to point out my white privilege is just, it's laughable to me, because and there's so many things, like you said, they say you got so many more opportunities from this than, a person of color may have gotten. That's not true.
Well,
I think anybody.
that's absolutely not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think the school would have given any other student the same opportunities that I did. I'm not upset with the different options that the school gave me to get out of the positions. I'm upset that I have to be removed from mine in the first place without any reason why, other than we didn't like what you said and how we didn't like how you handled yourself after the fact, which is calling out the issue of censorship from the beginning. You can't hide that. You can't not acknowledge that, especially when it's going on, in so many other places.
You know, it's literally the job of a journalist. They should be, praising your original tweeting to get the full story out, and your response when they tried to censor you. You should be calling that out as we did. I first heard your story on the radio, actually, on the way into work, on the very kind of the day it was breaking. And I don't think I'd even gotten to work. I think I was illegally tweeting in my car to Michael's team saying, "Get in touch with her. We need to cover this story." And from the very beginning, because that's what journalists do when there's censorship, when powerful people are trying to shape the narrative and decide what people can hear or aren't mature enough or ready to hear or whatever, when they're, nanny stating like that. That's what journalists do. We call that out. We put the truth in front of people. I don't want to be a Fox News apologist here, but we report, you decide really is what journalists do. Here's the truth as best we understand it. You decide what it means. You figure out, how is this relevant to you? Which parts of it do you believe? What seems more credible to you? That's what journalists do. Journalists do not shut down other people who are saying things that they don't like. That's just not journalism.
Right.
I don't care who at Walter Cronkite says that. That's not journalism. It's the opposite of journalism.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's my rant for the day.
So is there a due process that you went through that resulted in your being removed, or was this just sort of handed down from on high as executive fiat?
Yeah, there was no due process at all, which is one of the big issues that I had, and encouraged me to seek legal counsel, which was involved from the very, very beginning going through all of this. But there was no opportunity for me to speak to anybody, to plead my case at all. And so there was actually a meeting between the dean, the board of directors who were fellow students, and then all the different students who had an issue with my tweet. Behind closed doors that I didn't find out about until after the fact. Yeah, I found out about a couple days later, and it was them deciding what they thought was a fair punishment for me, without any representation of my own there. And so it was very much decided without my involvement at all and without any representation for myself.
And other students were involved in deciding what your punishment would be?
Right. The email kind of said that, we want to make sure that you think this is a fair punishment for her, that it satisfies your complaints, yada, yada, yada.
Oh,
So is that a normal thing at Cronkite? Is there an honor council or something that normally deals with issues like this? A group of students who normally deal with things like this?
It's supposed to be the Walter Cronkite College Council, which is one of the organizations that turned against me and put out one of the initial statements asking for me to be removed. So of course they weren't going to be any help for me at all. But I think this summer is really what started this ongoing issue of censorship within our university, and it started with Sonia Duhay, and it's just been ongoing ever since. And Sonia was our dean that was supposed to take over for Dean Callahan. She'd been hired and then, tweeted out some information over the summer that eventually got her removed from the job within 4 days.
So that's the kind of person you want making those decisions, clearly.
Yeah. The entire point, well, you just riffed on that. The entire point of journalism is to hold the powerful accountable, especially in how they treat the weak. There are few people in a weaker position than a student versus an entire higher education administration. It's the entire reason that you can't have relationships between students and administrators, because of the power differential. The entire point of journalism is to come to the aid of the weak, and instead they offered you up like sacrificial lamb. Just extraordinarily counterintuitive and offensive.
I wish it were counterintuitive. It's becoming
Well,
intuitive to me now.
to the
to the ideal
Yeah,
of journalism.
since-
Absolutely, no. It is. It's the opposite. It is the direct opposite of what journalism is supposed to be. Makes me very angry.
Well, it does sort of live up to the Cronkite name a little bit, or at least the trajectory he put us on.
Yeah,
you know,
sadly, that's true. I mean,
he's the first one who really stepped away from objectivity, and the left got to him in Vietnam.
Yeah, the most famous one
and-
anyway. He did a lot of great work, but yes, I can't argue with that.
And yesterday, Trump went out of his way to call out CNN for a lot of that behavior.
Yeah, so talking about journalism and the media and speaking truth to power and these things, I happened to be at the Trump rally in Prescott yesterday, and if you doubt that, you can see from my sunburn, which matches the red in my
Pretty
pin.
close.
Or mine. I
Yeah.
was there too.
You
So.
got nothing on me, baby. This is like somebody put my head in a microwave.
It's funny because the Scots usually tan so
Yeah,
well.
we
you
really
know?
do. The only thing
we're
that's
known
missing is
for
red
our
hair.
complexions.
Yeah, so I was there, and like all Trump rallies, it was a ton of fun, great music. People are happy to be there. It's kind of a slice of Americana. It was super hot out there. People were offering up, if they had an extra bottle of water, giving it away. The credit card machines went down at one point. I had somebody who was sitting there ask me if I needed any money to get some water for my family or something, and I said no. They can just dehydrate. But it was a great group of people, and so Trump comes in, makes his entrance as he always does, and right off the bat, within the first probably 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. He goes off on CNN. He hit him a little bit right out of the gate, and then he starts talking about COVID, and you'll forgive me if I read here. This is Trump speaking. He says, "You turn on CNN, this is all they cover. COVID, COVID, pandemic, COVID, COVID, COVID. You know why they're trying to talk everybody out of voting. People aren't buying it. People aren't buying it, CNN, you dumb bastards." And he's just looking back at the press risers where all the press is. And if you've gone to a Trump rally, this is a common theme. The president, I've never been to one where he's cursed them before, or at least that directly. But he loves to call them out, and then the audience loves to boo them, and then they love to feel self-righteous. It's a whole cycle.
Everybody wins.
Everybody, exactly.
That was fun.
Everybody
It was
wins.
fun to be in the press area.
Yeah, you've
for
been
me.
on the risers when that's happened before, haven't you? There's thousands of people directing hatred in your direction. But he was just super blunt, and so you can say a few things about this. The COVID thing, I think he's right about. The reason that COVID is being covered so heavily is there is a sensational element to it. We haven't seen anything like this in a long time. It is kind of like a natural disaster, a hurricane, a tornado. You can't really do anything to combat it. You can just kind of prep for it and then pick up the pieces afterwards. Yeah. I do think he's right that it is about probably not expressly suppressing the vote, but providing alternative means to vote. In other words, ballot harvesting, mail ballots that aren't barcoded like they are in Arizona. You know, your ballot here, your mail-in ballot, is coded specifically to you.
Right.
It's
You
your
can
signature
track it
and
online
everything.
and-
Right,
yeah.
exactly, which is a different thing than what they're trying to do elsewhere. So my question to all of you guys is, first, was Trump over the top, straight up looking at one of the biggest news organizations in the country and calling them dumb bastards, or was he not over the top and was he just right? And maybe those aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I will throw one theory in that one of the reasons I think that the mainstream media, CNN, et cetera, harp on COVID is because if you look at polling data, which Kayla loves when I talk about, because people get really excited about polling data. It's such an exciting phrase. But if you look at polling data, the polls indicate that people favor Trump on the economy. they favor Biden on COVID response,
Yeah.
rightly or wrongly. I'm not arguing either way. I'm just saying that's what the polls say. So the mainstream media, to the degree that they're interested in promoting the Democratic candidate, thinks that the best thing they can do is talk about COVID. Because if you're thinking about COVID, you're thinking Biden. But that, which is another reason why a lot of the great economic news that has been coming out for months really gets buried.
Yeah.
Because if you think economy, you think Trump. So having said that neither of those is really responsive to your question, whether that language was over the top or not. Personally, I think it's really hard to get over the top in reference to CNN and the establishment media. No matter what bad words I use to describe them, the reality is probably a little worse. So does that make it the right thing for him to say? That's another question, but he's playing to his base there. This is a Trump rally. He, as you said, it's a recurring theme. He says it in every one. It rallies people up. They get excited. They all, turn to the press people, even though we're in there, and yell at them and yell at us. And we're like, we're not. CNN.
I'm not. I don't go anywhere near those risers.
We're not CNN. We don't want to get infected by that. I mean, it's mostly. I was talking with Kobe, our director, earlier before the show, and I mean, it's mostly technical people back there. It's mostly camera guys who are like the most apolitical people.
Yeah.
They don't care. They're getting an hourly rate to take pictures and film. They don't care about this rally at all, and they've got thousands of people going, "You're the problem." I'm like, I'm not the problem. I don't think it was over the top. I think he was. Trump at his heart is a performer. I've heard him described as a performance artist. That's not all he is, of course. And when people call him that, it's usually pejorative, and I don't mean it that way at all. But he loves to be in front of people. He loves jazzing up the crowd. He feeds off of them. That's why he can stand at a rally for 8 hours at a time or whatever and do his little dancing, and because he just feeds off that energy. So,
well, you can see that too with the way the rallies go. This was an outdoor rally, and it was actually pretty cool because you got to see. First, they flew in a couple of Ospreys, which was really neat seeing those guys come in and land. I've never actually seen that before. They did a fighter jet flyover earlier in the day, which was really cool, and then they had Marine One circle over a couple of times before it landed. Then he did the most bad A thing I've ever seen anybody do. Yeah. He had them land Marine One, and he didn't take a Suburban from where it landed up to the stage. He had them pull the freaking helicopter up to the stage.
Really?
He drove up in his helicopter. It was truly remarkable. And then, of course, that provides the backdrop. You don't have Air Force One because the strip was too small, so you've got Marine One as the backdrop. Yeah, showmanship. And that's what, when you listen to the speeches, aside from broadly pro-American, America first rhetoric, it's showmanship. It's showmanship. And that's perfectly fine. If the media wants to complain about that and say, oh, people's attention spans are so short that this is what we're reduced to, well, look who shortened them.
Right.
It was you guys, and it was higher ed. They're the ones who shortened the attention spans. They made, I mean, we've said it so many times before, but they made Trump.
Absolutely.
And, what's going to be very interesting is what's going to come after Trump, what they make in response to him. But that's beyond the breadth of our conversation here.
Yeah, so we'll be looking to you and your generation to undo that work of short attention span. I mean, the idea of short attention span and a lack of critical thinking. Journalism and higher education are largely responsible for that. You're involved in both of those things up to your neck right now, basically. Is there a way to come back from that? Do you see a way to come back from that?
Oh yeah, I think it's gonna take some time, and it's gonna take people getting their courage back. I think a lot of people just feel so stifled and so just defeated from it because it is a very large quote unquote monster that we're up against here. But I don't think it's impossible. It's just gonna take a strong group of people that are courageous to say enough is enough, and this is where we turn it around.
Do you see courage among some of your classmates? That's a great word, and I think you picked it probably pretty carefully, pretty precisely. Do you see that demonstrated among other students at Cronkite, students other than yourself?
I do, and that is encouraging. I see some students that absolutely have it, and some that don't. And it's funny because when all of this happened, the station got an opportunity to kind of speak up either for me or against me, and we really care about their voices. And so we had a 2-hour station-wide meeting where everybody could just come in and talk. And people that I had never met before that were freshmen just came in and absolutely defended me to the core. And these guys are just getting into college, don't know anybody here, but stood up for what was right. And then I had friends that I had known since my first day of freshman year, send me a text or call me and say, hey, I support you. I don't think you did anything wrong, but I'm too scared to stand up for you because I don't want them to come after me. I don't want to lose anything for my career for standing up for you. And so I think it's so reflective of where we're at, of this bigger institution is absolutely scared people into being themselves.
Wow, so you had people actually text you that,
yeah,
saying, hey, I want to stand up for you, but I'm scared. So how did that make you feel? How did you respond to that?
I was so just upset and disappointed because that's what we're up against. Like, of course, my career and my standing within the university has been shattered now because of my stance and my standing up to them. But I've come from a very strong background of what's right is right and what's wrong and wrong. And it doesn't matter that Goliath is the one making it wrong. If you're little David, you still have to stand up to it. You still have to fight for what's right. And so to see my peers kind of take the stance of, well, we're too scared to lose or to back you up, it's like, well, that defeats the whole purpose then, because, if enough of us stand up to it, then it will start to turn around and it will start to go away. So, don't feel scared. Like, find your courage, and no matter how much I talk to them, you can change their mind. So it's disheartening.
I do want to disagree a little bit with one thing you just said, Rayleigh, that your career has been shattered. The Western Journal is the largest, most influential Christian conservative publisher of political news and commentary. And as you get closer to graduation, we want to talk to you. So I wouldn't say it's been shattered. Now, your career at CNN or MSNBC, probably a little shaky, probably a little CNBC, maybe not calling you so quickly. But we would love to talk to you as you wrap up your college career. So go ahead.
Well, I just want to agree with George, and there's, not to get all therapeutic here, but there is probably a Romans 8:28 sort of application here. All things work together for the good of those who love God, who've been called according to his purpose. The part of your career that would have been shattered, I mean, I don't want to presume to know what you wanted to do. I'm not sure how great that part of your career would have been anyway, given your values. If you had gone into the legacy media, we've rescued people from the legacy media before, and they come out kind of with, I'm not really joking, sort of with PTSD.
Yeah.
The last person we brought from there, I mean, he was in rough shape. I think you're going to get some opportunities out of this that are going to be truly life-changing and a lot better than maybe what you would have gotten otherwise. So for whatever it's worth, there you go.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So
yeah,
go ahead, Rayleigh.
I was just going to say, I don't want to diminish the amount of support that I've gotten through all this too. It's been absolutely amazing. And so I think that was kind of a big lesson that I learned is, as you mentioned, if that's your calling, you have to stand up, even if it means standing alone. But in time, people, like you guys come out to be supportive. And so I'm very, very grateful for that through all of this.
That's right. So we just have a little bit of time left here. I want to move on to one other quick topic of censorship. Well, we have a guest who's such an expert on that topic. We're all familiar with the New York Post story that broke last week, I'm sure, Hunter Biden's emails, and really what became the story behind the story is the social media censorship of that New York Post article. Even the Poynter Institute, which I just find fascinating, the Poynter Institute slammed Facebook and Twitter last week in a column by and I have to read this because it's just so long. Her title is International Fact-Checking Network Associate Director. And her name, if I get this right, is Cristina Tardagila. Tardagila. I'll bet it's Tardagila.
You didn't get it right.
Yeah, probably not. Spanish is only my fifth language, so I don't do that all that well. In her column, what she said was, and I'll read this too, she said, it seems like Facebook and Twitter have decided to assume the position they've been avoiding for so long. Less than a month from Election Day, both companies finally became arbiters of the truth on the internet. Naive are those who believe this isn't dangerous. So I couldn't have said that better myself. I talked about this a little bit on the show last week. In response to all of this hubbub, can I say hubbub without sounding 80 years old? Hubbub?
No.
Okay.
But it's okay. We're all about
It was pretty
truth,
much
George.
universal. It was a no.
We're
So
all
in
about
response
truth.
to all of this commotion, you know what? There's no good.
Hullabaloo.
Okay. It's just going to get worse, isn't it? In response to this, we've seen multiple announcements from Twitter, including policy changes, apologies from Jack Dorsey in tweets, all kinds of stuff from Twitter itself. From Facebook, we've gotten pretty much radio silence. Like on the 14th, the day that the story broke, Andy Stone, who's their communications policy director or something like that, he said, "Hey, we're not going to link to this. We're going to reduce the reach of this article. People won't be able to see it as much until it's been fact checked." Okay, he says this is in accordance with longstanding policy.
That
was on the
never
14th.
been exercised.
That was on the 14th. He has not tweeted since, not once in about a week. Now, he's not the world's most prolific tweeter, but if you look at the first half of October, it's like 21 tweets, 22 tweets, something like that. Second half of October, 0. I mean, literally nothing. So my question is, why the difference in approaches? Twitter's really kind of being aggressive here, and Facebook's essentially silent. Do you have a thought on that, really?
I think it just goes back to, the simple biological approach of fight, flight, or freeze. And I think, Jack Dorsey's taking the approach of we'll fight it, we'll apologize, we'll say, whatever they want us to say to be quiet. Mark Zuckerberg is taking the, kind of the freeze and let's just duck under the radar long enough and hope that this blows over. And you see that in every walk of life where people are met with controversy. But, I really think it's our job now to hold their feet to the fire on this. It can't go on. I mean, the press secretary of the United States, Kayleigh McEnany, got locked out of her account. That is her job. That is not Twitter's decision to say what she can and cannot say. That is censorship at its finest. And the Senate Judiciary Committee announced on Thursday that they are going to start investigating this. And they've acknowledged that it's censorship at its finest. There's no other way to put it. And if the situation were reversed, that the conservative side would get absolutely just on fire for this. And so it's our job to reciprocate that and to make sure that they are held accountable for their actions, because that completely violates one of the most important amendments and, foundations of our country, and it can't be tolerated.
I like the fight or freeze metaphor there.
Yeah,
good. Zuckerberg has the eyes for the freezing even, right? I mean, you can just see him like looking at the camera.
Well, that's
Way
long. That's long been their response to, even when we've had issues with them. They like to go radio silent and be very non-committal.
Oh, it's true. Yeah, I emailed them about Andy Stone last week, and generally speaking, when I talk to their media response people, I don't get much of a response, but I usually get a response. We do. Western Journal does. Nothing. I got no response to I think I sent them 4 questions last week, nothing.
Twitter, though, will come out and I agree with you, they will fight. I mean, you'll see Jack show up somewhere.
Seems to be his personality.
I think it is. I think it is his personality. I don't think you would ever see Zuck show up, or Zuckerberg, as Victor Davis Hansen calls him. I don't think you would ever see Zuckerberg show up on Joe Rogan's podcast or something defending Facebook's record, whereas Jack did.
Right.
I agree with you. I really like the fight, flight, or freeze thing. The problem is that nobody's flying right now. Nobody's retreating on this. They're digging in, and without either an option that people can go to, like Parler, without something like that, I don't know where people can go, and I don't know what would make these guys flee. Except maybe if you look at regulation, if you look at antitrust.
Yeah, regulation wouldn't. They'll just write the regulation.
Yeah.
That's what lobbyists do. But DOJ, there's a report out this morning, DOJ is finally filing antitrust against Google today, an antitrust lawsuit. It's supposed to be filed today. That's what the report is anyway. So maybe we'll see some fleeing in the near future.
Good.
It worked well against Microsoft.
Yeah.
It was effective. I hated it at the time, but I have to give sort of grudging respect now that a lot of what they were trying to do with those antitrust lawsuits against Microsoft was fairly effective.
Yeah, conservatives have this default, government should not touch it,
Right.
government should not do anything approach, which isn't really accurate. Governments do exist for a reason.
Right.
They exist for when collective action is needed. And I mean, I think if there were ever a time that collective action were needed, it's probably now, and has to do with the squelching and censorship of speech. And I'm not sure how the government needs to respond to that. I have a couple of ideas, but I don't know.
All right, one last question. Michael, I'm going to ask you this, and then Rayleigh, I'm going to ask you to give us the last word today. So Rayleigh mentioned Senate investigations. Is this it? Have these companies finally gone too far? Are we actually going to see meaningful government response to big tech censorship?
I think it depends on how the elections go. So if we manage to hold on Republicans, then yeah, I think there's a chance we could start to see some changes. But it's going to be a really long process. It's not going to happen overnight.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Fair enough. All right, Rayleigh, last word. Do you think we're going to see anything effective here, or is this just a lot of grandstanding and political speeches?
I think, as Michael said, being so close to an election, it's going to be, it'll be a while if we do. But I really hope that, if Trump is reelected, that he does, really dive into this and investigate it, because I think it's very important. And even if Biden wins, I highly hope that he does. I don't have much faith, but I would like to see it go all the way to the end.
Yeah. All right. And that's the last word. And that is our time for today. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope you'll come back and talk with us again. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for having me on.
Great. And to all of our viewers out there, thank you for joining us too. We'll be back every Tuesday and Thursday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern with WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. See you next time.